Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 183 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your co-host, Alex Schmitz, and today I'm joined, as always, by my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, college football fans and Husker fans.
Hello, everybody. We are back here, a father-son duo, to talk about college football by college football fans for college football fans. Today, we'll be talking about our favorite team, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, and their close game against number 3 ranked Ohio State. It was a closer game than we were expecting, so we can take something from that. I should say number 4 ranked Ohio State. Don't want to pat them on the back too much.
No,
but we'll be talking about that, a little bit of volleyball, as well as all the big games from Week 9 and how our predictions from last week fared there, as well as previewing the upcoming Nebraska UCLA game that is so very crucial.
Yes, sounds like a good podcast.
Indeed.
And I'm sure we'll consume time doing it.
Yeah, we don't usually have a problem with that. But before we dive into all that, we were going to stick with our tradition and open up a cold beverage. I've got myself one of my Golden Road mango carts here.
Okay. And I am back down to the basic stuff. We are now settled in to our winter home in the Phoenix area. I'm going to be drinking the traditional Miller Lite, a fine Pilsner beer. So cheers to you, son.
All right. Cheers. So going back to last podcast, we did give our predictions as per usual. We were pretty pessimistic coming out of that beatdown against Indiana, knowing that we're playing away against Ohio State, number 4 ranked team in the country. So I predicted that we would lose 49-17. Well, you predicted a bigger spread of 59-13. So when you hear that, and then you look and see, okay, we scored 17 points like I predicted we would, but they only scored 21. Our defense came to play, and you would look at that and say, oh, they did so much better, than you thought. That's a positive thing. But on the other hand, us Nebraska fans are just frustrated because we had that game in our hands. We very easily could have won it.
Absolutely. There were some very significant missed opportunities. Even with all those missed opportunities, we had the lead in the fourth quarter, and if we could have, come up with one or two more big defensive plays that keep them from scoring that final drive that they scored on, we might have been able to, burn clock and hold on for a victory, but we didn't do it, and that's a broken record at this point for Nebraska. So, there's not much you can say about it other than, you hope that at some point our team and our coaches, this is very important, and our coaches begin to understand what it takes to win games in this league. Okay. And I say in this league because that's the thing that's different for a lot of the coaches that we've had over the years that have come to play or come to coach at Nebraska, whether it be head coaches or assistant coaches. And I think there's something fundamental about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, not to mention, I believe on that last drive Ohio State had where they scored their touchdown, there was like a 3rd and long play where we had a pass interference go against us, and so that gave them an automatic first down. Just imagine that didn't have that. We managed to stop them there. They had to punt. Then you're in a totally different scenario.
Exactly right.
Yep. But I was actually listening to this game via the Husker radio broadcast. I was at an event this weekend. But I listened pretty much to all the game on the radio, and then afterwards watched the highlights on YouTube to see the big plays. And we did bounce back from the Indiana game in a lot of ways, which was good to see. We were more confident in our running game. We had basically an average of about 4 yards a carry on rushing for a total of 121 yards, and then had 152 yards of passing on 33 attempts for a total of 273 yards. And meanwhile, we held Ohio State to just 285. Pretty impressively, we had 18 first downs, while they only had 11. which goes to show that they didn't have many drives where they really dinked it and dunked it on us. They had a couple of big pass plays that got them their early touchdowns.
Correct. There were like 3 plays, bonehead plays by us, where we just flat out, I mean, like a safety got caught with his eyes in the backfield, didn't even see a guy, a wide receiver who's quite fast from Ohio State running straight down the middle of the field. By the time he figured out what was going on and started chasing, he was already 8 yards behind the dude, and that guy just caught it and ran for a touchdown. There's no way he was going to get caught. So yeah. There. Other than those few plays, you take those 2 plays away, and Nebraska's defense per play would have been spectacular, really. But at the end of the day, we lost.
No, it's true. It looked like it was going to be a repeat of the Indiana game early because we had another miscue on special teams on the opening kickoff. We muffed that. We went 3 and out, and then we had a bad punt. So they had great field position on their first drive of the game, and the defense impressively stopped them on a 4th down where they went for it. So they got out of there with nothing. Then on a later drive, they drove it down us a little bit and then missed a makeable field goal.
Yep.
So got to give props to Tony White and the defense. They stepped up after Indiana kind of scored all over them and really gave their quarterback some real trouble. We sacked him 3 times while they sacked Dylan Raiola 3 times.
And he is a very athletic quarterback, Ohio State's quarterback, very athletic, very much a dual threat when he was at Kansas State. And so, to basically keep him from really hurting us in that run game, as well as, kind of keeping things in front on the passing game and not letting him and his NFL wide receivers. I mean, literally, they have 3 or 4 guys that are going to be playing on Sunday. And so for our defense, and particularly our secondary, who was much maligned after last week's game, to, defend reasonably well in that, that's pretty good. You got to give Coach. I was critical of Coach White last week. I'm going to give him some props this week.
Right.
And I'm going to go a step further because I know at some point in this podcast I'm going to be ripping one Marcus Satterfield for his role in this whole thing. But I will have to concede. I want to be upfront about it. That it's frustrating to me that Nebraska had opportunities that we didn't take advantage of. The play calling down at the goal line when we went for it on 4th down and didn't get it, so they had a goal line stand, should never have happened, in my opinion. That play calling and sequence of those plays was atrocious, just horrible play calling by Marcus. But at the same time, we have to concede that there were 2 pass opportunities literally wide open for Dylan. And if he gets the ball in their hands, they're touchdowns, both of them. And he doesn't do it. So you got to give the coordinator some credit for drawing up that play or having that in the arsenal of audibles for Dylan to use so that, we could have won the game if either or both of those had been touchdowns. And they were right there to be taken.
Right. Yes, I remember the radio broadcasters mentioned that. Like, it was a successful play. We got a 1st down, but he was like, "Oh, but Dylan, he missed the dude wide open in the end zone."
Right.
So, that's one of those things, right, with the freshman quarterback, right? Obviously, Dylan is very impressive for his age, but he still does miss things. They did praise the fact there was that one big play where Dylan dropped back in the pocket and then ran it and got a really big gain. And the announcer was like, "Yes, that's what I want to see more of." He's left a lot of opportunities like that on the table earlier in the season. Right. So it's good to see him being willing to put his body on the line in some of those situations.
Well, and again, you know what that is? Big Ten football. Okay. And that's not NFL football. Coach Rule, I think, sometimes talks a little too much about this is what they do in the NFL kind of thing. But you know what? There's a little difference between NFL and college. In the NFL, because of the cost of a quarterback's contract and his value to the team and his value to himself, different decisions are made about when you run and how often you run, and those kinds of things. But in college, no, you do what it takes to get the first down. You do what it takes to win. And yes, there have been a number of occasions when Dylan was scrambling, and if he just tucked it and ran, we would have got a first down. Instead, he tries to throw the ball for a first down, but it doesn't do anything, right? Because then it goes incomplete and you punt, or it was fourth down or whatever, right? So I don't know. It's just one of those deals where Marcus has some good play calls. The overall scheme of the offense is okay in some regards. I think, but his running game collectively is infantile. It's not sophisticated enough, in my opinion, especially for what we're trying to get accomplished and what you need to be able to do in the Big Ten. Again, you have to have a fairly sophisticated running game to be consistently successful in the Big Ten. Now, you can get away with this in the Big 12. You can get away with this in, Conference USA or whatever, maybe even the ACC. But you can't get away with it in the SEC or the Big Ten. You have to have some sophistication in your running game. So when you need to bury a clock, when you need to basically run away and hide to win a game, you need an offensive line and you need a series of running plays that allow you to do that. And that same complexity helps you to find something that works. If they're defending one run type that you have, then you should have a counter run against that allows you to have success. If they're going to be doing this and they're jumping and they're really doing a great job of securing the edges of the offense, then I should be able to tuck it up inside of them with a trap play. There's got to be complementary football within the running game, not complementary pass versus run. I mean complementary running game.
Right. Well, to praise Satterfield once again before we rip on him later, I remember watching the highlights. There was one play, I think it was on a 3rd and short at a crucial point in the game, where we did a little fake handoff and then a little shuttle pass or a little flip.
Yes.
Forward. The guy caught it and ran it and got the first down. I thought there's something that we haven't seen much this year, and it caught Ohio State off guard and it worked perfectly.
Right. What now are you talking about the one, the little shuttle pass that we used to get the 2-point conversion?
Yes, that was it. It was the 2-point conversion.
That's what it was.
Yes.
Yes. That was a great play. Now, but again, see, that's the kind of stuff you've got to do. And if we have those plays, let's use those instead of throwing 12 or 13 screen passes. I hate the screen game.
Yeah, that was the meme online afterwards.
The screen game should be done 3 or 4 times a game based on being able to anticipate that the other team is going to be bringing extra players. If they're bringing heat, then you want to run a screen because they may be abandoning their setup, right, of their coverage in the back end, and you might be able to get some space, right? So screens are typically called to slow down an attacking defense, but we called it way too often, and literally out of the 12 times, and I might be exaggerating a little bit, but not much, there was only 1, maybe 2 that were successful. Every other one was actually a tackle for a loss.
Right.
I mean, it was negative. So the screen game ain't working at all, and you have to have another answer than the screen.
Right. Yes. I saw plenty of fans will agree with you on hating the screen right now, so don't worry about that.
Right. Well, and it's not that I hate the screen. It's that it's the lack of balance,
right.
And it's him not understanding what you have to do. At the end of the day, you've got to find a way to run the football in any game, in every game, particularly Big Ten games. If the other team basically knows that you've abandoned efforts to run the football when it matters, that's hugely advantageous for them defending the rest of your offense. If we actually established a running game, I can't imagine how that would open up the offense for Dylan. Like if this coming week we play UCLA, if somehow we were able to establish a line of scrimmage and run some trap plays and get multiple first downs from traps and cross blocks and some good off tackle plays, maybe even use a fullback. I know we just lost our fullback for the year, and so that's a huge blow because I wanted to see us in under center and I formation with a fullback more often. And the fact that we lost Libentrit for the season means that's going to be even less likely to happen. We're only going to see a fullback in those stupid bulk sets that we do up at the goal line, which to me is a giveaway. I don't find them to be all that successful myself.
Right.
So,
I also want to comment on special teams. As I mentioned, it got off to a terrible start. But after that, Brian Buschini kind of stabilized, was kicking, solid punts. I wouldn't say any one of them was like amazing, but he kicked solid punts. And then John Hull, who has been our replacement field goal kicker for Tristan Alvano, who I believe was 1-5 on field goals going into this game. We put him in some tough situations, and he kicked a 39-yarder, a 47-yarder, and a 54-yarder. That last one being at the end of the first half, and really kind of energized the team. So it goes to show that he's got a hell of a leg. Now the question is, in the future games, can he prove his consistency?
Right. Well, but here's the thing. That was, let's see, we're 5-3. So that was week 8, right? That was our 8th game. We shouldn't still be having screw ups on kickoffs.
Yes.
A screw up on kickoff is maybe acceptable in the first week where you make a mental error, maybe the second week, but by the third week of the season, kicking game should be in the rearview mirror. There should be no longer any kicking game issues if you're doing the right thing on your and you're devoting. So either Coach Rule is not spending enough time with the kicking game, which again, I come from the Tom Osborne philosophy of coaching, and that means that the game has 3 sides: offense, defense, and kicking game. He didn't call it special teams, he called it kicking game. And that's because he wanted it to be treated like an equal partner to the offense and the defense. And they devoted an enormous amount of time to repetitions and mental repetitions of all the scenarios that can likely happen in the kicking game, knowing how important they are. And then to develop the skills, whether it's punting in the coffin corner, whether it's kicking a ball off and having it go out of bounds or go into the end zone, or having it land as close to the goal line as possible. So you force them to take it out, whatever coverage situation you want, you need to be practicing that shit. And I don't know if it's that Matt doesn't devote enough time to his kicking game, or if his kicking game coordinator just sucks. But it's one of those two things.
The consistent kickoff mistakes we've seen in the past couple games are definitely something I'm concerned about, but I'm relieved that we can have faith now that we can actually kick a field goal. And I will say I agreed with Matt when he decided to go for it on that 4th and 1.5 yards, that we talked about earlier. We could have kicked the field goal there, but I like that he was being aggressive. And since we were on the road, against number 4 ranked Ohio State, right, we were the massive underdog. So in that situation, you go for the kill if you get the opportunity to do it. We disagree with the play call that was chosen there, but I agree with the principle of going for it on that play.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. And that's another criticism of Satterfield. What the hell are you guys doing? And again, Coach Rule has since explained it. Again, another bad location of the ball. They genuinely thought the ball was on the half-yard line, not the 1.5-yard line. And by the time they figured out where the ball was actually located, the play had already been called. They were already moving up to the line of scrimmage, and Coach Rule's really only option was to call a timeout to stop that play and reset, right? And he made the decision. He admits it was his decision and that he made it not to call the timeout, not to use one of his timeouts in that situation. Now, if you ask me, when you're on that 1.5 yard line on a 4th down play, if you now know, oh, I've got the wrong play call in, you call a timeout there. So I would argue that Coach Rule made a mistake. If in fact he had that realization before the snap of the ball, he damn well should have used the timeout to do that. So that's a mistake that he kind of admitted to.
Right. Well, that's interesting to know. I didn't hear that part. And there was an earlier part in the first half of the game where it was a 4th and middle yardage situation, and we weren't sure if we were going to go for it or not. And Rule decided, no, let's just punt it. But he took so long to decide that then we had to call a timeout to avoid a delay of game. I think, maybe he was trying to avoid that scenario happening in the second half when your timeouts are even more crucial, right? Because you want to hold on to those for what might happen at the end of the game. But I would agree, if you know your play call is wrong for the position of the ball in that kind of super important situation, that's worth a timeout.
Yep, I agree. And so anyway, but again, I think just the whole concept of this diving over the pile crap, that is so NFL football from the 1980s and 90s. I just think it's too darn easy for defenses to anticipate that and basically go up. Once you leave your feet as a diving runner, then you're other than the velocity that you have, you have no control over your body. You have no ability to power into the end zone if you have first contact. To me, there are a lot of other ways to do that than to dive over the top. I'm just not a big fan of that.
I mean, I agree that there are other options, of course. But we went for it again later when we had a different drive.
Oh, I know.
And we were legitimately on like either the 1 yard line or the half-yard line, and it worked.
No, it was a half-yard line.
So I think it works if you're that close. But the key was that we weren't that close in that other situation, and that's why you should have called the timeout.
Right, exactly.
Talking about the spotting of the ball, though, that transitioned us to the refereeing in this game, which we did have a good number of penalties, 7 for 62 yards, so not as bad as some of our other games, but a lot of them were in crucial moments.
Yes.
Like that pass interference we mentioned earlier on defense. Meanwhile, Ohio State only had 3, but they should have had many more, as has been documented by fans online. Oh my gosh. I mean, we had literally defensive linemen being mugged. Literally, it was early in the game. It was one of the first things that I was jumping out of my seat, yelling at the TV, and Kim was having to shake her head. My wife grabbing. Literally, a guy grabbed our defensive end by the throat, around the neck, okay, and just horse collared him. Now, he didn't horse collar him down. He horse collared him enough to slow him down so he couldn't catch the quarterback, and then let go. And he got away with it, okay. And but the problem is that there were 3 of those on tackles. Let me see, 2 on the left tackle, 1 on the right tackle for Ohio State, that were just blatant. And when usually if your tackle holds, the refs should see that, because you have a referee on both sidelines. That's their job, is to look at that line play. Now, a lot of times you can get away with some stuff if you're a guard or a center, right? But if you're a left tackle, you're out on the edge, you're going to get caught, except if you're Ohio State. Then apparently it's okay. Yeah.
And then we had a touchdown, which ended up leading to I believe a field goal try for us, in which I do apologize. I think this is the one where we ultimately ended up scoring anyway. I don't remember, but we had the invention of a new rule where apparently you can be down by your shin. Never heard this before. Usually the definition of being down is knees or elbows or butt, right? Never before have I heard referees say his shin was down. Never. I've been watching football for 50 years, never heard that.
I will say on that one, when I watched the highlight, it looked to me like his knee was down, regardless of the shin, right at the goal line.
I've seen slow motion. I've seen photos of it. I've seen slow-mo of it. And I'm here to tell you the knee doesn't go down until that ball has crossed the line. That's my opinion.
Fair enough.
It just pisses me off.
But yeah, even just listening to radio announcers, even they were starting to complain about the reffing and the spying of the ball, especially right at the end of the half where we very clearly got a first down, which would have stopped the clock in a tight situation at the end of the first half. But they said, no, it's 3rd and 1. And that cost us a lot of time. And we got the first down. And thankfully, that was the one where John Hull kicked the 54-yarder. So thankfully, he had enough leg for us to get the field goal anyways, but it would have been potentially a much easier field goal if we had, got another extra player or two in and got a little further down the field. Right. And the Big Ten has even apologized for that publicly here today on Monday as we're recording this, basically saying that that should have been reviewed and overturned, and that was a mistake on our end. But then they also caveated a call that went against Ohio State, a targeting call that was very crucial later in the game, which, if there wasn't targeting, would have resulted in a turnover for Ohio State. They said that targeting call was wrong, and that was the call that prompted the Ohio State fans to boo, for Ryan Day to freak out and throw his headset, and for the fans to throw bottles on the field in an imitation of last week's Texas fans.
Right. And amazingly, Ohio State, unlike Coach Rule at Nebraska, who got a 15-yard penalty on himself for throwing his headset, Coach Day did not. And Coach Day, Rule was in the white zone, of the right along the sidelines when he did his little antic. Coach Day was 4 or 5 yards onto the field when he did his. Plus the water bottle thing for the second week in a row, and I predicted this on our podcast last week, Alex, that if the fact that Texas got away with that and did not get penalized, that was going to prompt more schools and more games where that was going to happen. And sure as heck, the very next week it happens in our game against Ohio State, and again, no penalty was assessed on Ryan Day, or there should have been 2. Ryan Day should have gotten a 15-yard penalty, and the Ohio State student section or fan base should have been given a 15-yard penalty on behalf of their team for the stupidity of the bottle throwing. You got to punish that immediately. I guarantee it's going to happen again. I'm going to go on record right now as saying before the end of this season, we're going to have another bottle throwing incident, because amazingly, here we are on Monday after that event and second week in a row, and it should be the talk of all of these sports programs, from ESPN to the Big Ten Network to the SEC. They should all be talking about how that is unacceptable, and that everybody should be in agreement that they have to come down hard on whatever fan base does that next, that they need to be made an example, whoever does it next, because that is unacceptable under any circumstances, unacceptable. It doesn't matter that the play call or the penalty was bad or wrong. As we're discussing right now, there are errors or there are mistakes in every single game. There are just a hell of a lot of them in Big Ten games all of a sudden. And they always seem to be mostly against Nebraska, which I know sounds like a whiner thing to say, but I think I have documentable proof. You do recall during the Scott Frost era, there was 2.5 years of Big Ten games when we were playing in conference where we did not receive a holding call.
I don't remember that.
2.5 years we went without getting one holding call in our favor, along our defensive line. Now, it's almost impossible for that to be true statistically, unless someone's ignoring it.
Right.
So
yeah. We've been talking about reffing quite a bit this season, and this game was kind of another example of it. Not going our way. And it's tough to swallow, especially in a game this close, right? And just imagine if a few of those calls had gone differently, or some of those uncalled holdings, against Ohio State had been called. And if we had won this game and all of a sudden everyone was talking about Nebraska having the upset of the week, we would be the talk of the town this week. But it didn't happen. So, you just kind of got to, I know Rules talked about it, right? Like he's had conversations with the Big Ten reffing, chief, and he thanked the chief ref and the head of the Big Ten and all that.
Right.
And talked about some of his, his disagreements with them, but he was very, courteous, as he usually is, because he can't, he's got to keep his team focused, on the things that we legitimately failed at, right, and how we can improve on that, and not let them dwell on, well, the ref screwed us.
Right, exactly. And like he said, for you guys to talk about that now on a Monday, right? I need to get my kids ready for the next game, which is UCLA. I can't dwell on that anymore. So it just needs to get better. They stop with the apologies and the acknowledgments. No, don't stop with them. It's good to do, but recognize that you need to demand more from your referees. They have to do a better job. They have to call more of the legitimate penalties that exist. And I understand the argument that, well, you could call holding on every play. Well, then maybe we need to for a little while so that coaches and players stop cheating. Because the bottom line is that if you know that, 6 out of 10 times, maybe 7 out of 10 times, you can hold and not get caught, what is an offensive lineman going to do? Heck, what is a coach going to do? If I'm coaching offensive line and I know that in the league that I am coaching in, they only call holding, 30% of the time, I'm going to be coaching my kids on how to hold.
Right. Discreetly.
Yes. And they all do it.
Yeah.
And it just keeps getting worse.
Right.
But so that makes the blatant holding, like we saw this weekend in the Nebraska-Ohio State game, even more of an issue. Okay? Right. It's just, I'm sick of it.
All right. So, at the end of the day, right, we got to take even though I know Matt Rule doesn't like this concept, but I think we do have to take the moral victory in that we bounced back from a very tough loss to Indiana and played well in this Ohio State game, managed to keep it close with them. And Rule talked about, although he doesn't believe in moral victories, how proud he was of his team and how much they improved and how determined they were on the sidelines this week. And we've got to take that energy with us now into this very crucial game against UCLA. This is a home game for us after a few away games. So hopefully, the Memorial Stadium crowd helps us out there. UCLA is coming to this game 2-5. They're near the bottom of the Big Ten, but they are coming off of bye week. So they have 2 weeks to prepare for us, like Ohio State did, like Indiana did.
And like other teams are going to in our final 3 games after this one too.
Right. And we have a bye after UCLA. So, we have a chance to kind of heal after this one too. I believe we're favored by 9 points by the spread.
Why is that, Alex? We have one of the least prolific offenses. We scored 17 points this past week. The week before that, we scored 7 points. Our offense average, there is under no circumstance can I justify a 9-point line for a Nebraska team this year, right? Based on our offense's performance. I mean, if you're going to say that we're a 9-point favorite, then you must be assuming, Vegas, that we're not going to let UCLA score a point. Because when you start talking probabilities, UCLA only has to score 7, and they're probably going to keep within the 9 points of us, based on our performance to date. And we're 8 weeks in. So where the hell does that come from? And I can tell you exactly where it comes from. It's about money, and it's about where people are investing. But the problem is that number establishes an expectation. A 9-point favorite is a huge favorite in a football game, right? I mean, you look at the NFL.
I would say huge, but
well, if in the NFL a 9-point
Well,
margin.
sure, but we're not in the NFL. We're talking about college, where teams can win
Well,
by
I know.
40 points.
I understand, but my point is that 9 points is a very big number, definitely in the NFL, but even in the college game. Michigan, for example, when they're a favorite, oftentimes, you know, they would have to be a lot better than another team for them to get a 9-point favorite. It just blows me away how this expectation just keeps coming back, and it builds the pressure. I just want people to leave us alone and let us win this damn game and get to 6 wins and stop heaping all this expectation on a Nebraska team that hasn't done anything.
Well,
It just drives me crazy.
we did beat Colorado, and just looked it up. The spread for our last game, for reference, was minus 25.5. So Ohio State was expected to kill us, and they only beat us by 4 points. So that's why, everyone's saying, well, hey, they competed with Ohio State, who's one of the best teams in the country, and UCLA has really struggled. They haven't been a explosive offense, and Nebraska's defense is really good. Now, the thing I will say in defense of UCLA is when you really look at that record, right, 2-5 is bad, but they lost to Indiana, LSU, Oregon, and Penn State. So they've played a tough schedule, and obviously we all know now Indiana's a damn good team, so that loss doesn't look as bad. Now, they did lose against Minnesota in a close one, so you got to look at that as a disappointment if you're UCLA. And then they barely beat both Hawaii and Rutgers. But we also barely beat Rutgers, as you recall, exactly. 14-7. And they've had a bye week. So UCLA, I think this should be a win for us. And I think it's crucial that it is a win for us to get to that 6th win, for us to go into our bye with some positivity as we go into a final 3-game stretch with tougher opponents, USC, Iowa, and Wisconsin. So this is our easiest game left in our schedule, and I think it's crucial we prove that we can beat them, and even better, beat them solidly, beat them by 14 points or something, and then we can go in with some confidence that we can compete against these last 3 teams.
Right. Great summary, Alex. Excellent summary, and you are exactly right. But again, you broke down the reasons why I can't be confident that that's going to happen, right? This UCLA team has lost to some very talented teams, and especially recently has looked better and more balanced. And their offense has been more productive than ours. I don't know where the 9 points comes from. I get that it's a home game for Nebraska, so there's 3. But where does the other 6 come from? It just blows me away. And so with that is this expectation that we, quote, quote, should win this game. And there is no should in Nebraska. And our players better be ready to compete like their lives. If they lose this game, they're going to get lined up and shot. Okay? They're going to be a firing squad after the game if they don't win. No, you know what I'm saying? I mean, they need to play with an abandon and an intensity and a commitment level like they've never played in their lives. That's how important this game needs to be.
Right. Well, I will say you commented, and I think a comment from Matt Rule last week about how many kind of ankle tackles we've received. How many plays were this close to to blowing up, and then they were just stopped. And even here against Ohio State, that happened a couple times, like where Dowdell had a nice run, and he just had to make one guy miss, and he was off to the races, right? And then that guy would catch him. But this UCLA team has given up big points, like 42 to Indiana, 34 to LSU, 34 to Oregon, 27 to Penn State, 32 against the Rutgers team that doesn't have a great offense, right? So I think while our offense isn't great, their defense isn't great. So I think we will be able to score more points than 17 like we did against Ohio State. And I think our defense will give them trouble. The one major concern I do have, because I rewatched the Rutgers game highlights since that was their most recent game before the bye, and they definitely have speed. If they kind of beat you one-on-one with their wide receivers, they can go to the house on a big play. So that's my major concern.
Yep. And again, A great summary, Alex. I think that is the key. They have really good team speed. They don't lack athletes. They're basically in the first year of a new coach, right? And they're having to kind of reinvent themselves. And they got kind of abandoned offensively from when Chip Kelly left them to go become an offensive coordinator at Ohio State, which was kind of an odd move for Chip. But he also kind of that left them in the lurch in terms of what kind of offense are we going to run? You know, do they have the right personnel? And they only had one off season to recruit and to transfer portal guys, and they didn't necessarily have the greatest season to use for leveraging transfer portal interest. So I get that they probably don't have a roster that matches what they want to do, but yet there were athletes that Chip left over with them, right? So it's going to be extremely important that our defense play and keep people in front, right? Keep their running game bottled up, and not let what happened at Indiana happen again, right? Now they're going to have the advantage of it being in Lincoln, and they need to take advantage of that crowd and have that defense just swallow them up whole. And then our offense needs to get rid of all the damn mistakes. Dylan needs to settle down and play a good game. He doesn't have to win the damn thing for us. He doesn't have to be remarkable. He just needs to be good. And when the plays are there, make them.
Right. Well, so we got to give our predictions here for this very crucial game. I'm going to go ahead and predict that we do win. And I'm going to say it'll be 31 Nebraska to, let's say, 17 UCLA.
Okay. It's a good score. I'm going to say it's I don't know if we can score 31 points. I'm going to say it's going to be 24-17 Nebraska.
A little bit closer. All right.
Yep.
Well, Vegas likes mine better, so we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. I want it to be 56-7.
Well, of course you do. And then real quick, just to mention the Nebraska volleyball team, they've continued to remain undefeated since we've last talked about them. They do have the one loss, obviously, earlier in the year to SMU. But now they're going into a very critical game, an away game against Wisconsin on November 1st, who has kind of been our rival, and they've had the better end of the rivalry in recent years. So what's your feeling going into this game?
I think we lose, and it probably will be. We might get one set, but I doubt it. I think they beat us 3-0. I think we have been trending for the last 2 weeks in a kind of up and down, mediocre, not getting better, not necessarily getting statistically worse, but I've seen no indications that we've solved every team earlier in the year in volleyball has a few things that they need to work on, right? And usually in some tough games early in the season, they get exposed a little bit and then they can learn from those mistakes. Wisconsin has gone through that process and has now emerged with a team that is way, way better than they were at the beginning of the year. And they always had the talent. They just needed to work on some details, and they had a new setter. And so they were having to integrate this new setter into their system. Well, that's all happened now, and they're playing at a very high level. I would put them second behind Pitt as the two best teams in the NCAA that I've witnessed over the last 3 weeks. Nebraska, when we were playing, at the end of our non-conference season and we were playing Stanford and Louisville and beating them 3-0, I felt like we were on a trajectory that we might have been able to get to that level. But then we've wallowed in mediocrity where we have continued to win. So I'm not saying we're not a good team. We are. But we are not a great team, and we're not a championship team. And to be a championship team, you have to be able to attack successfully when you're out of system. We can't do that right now. We have a one position that's you have two outside hitters or left side hitters on your team, and one of our outside hitters has been inconsistent and performing at an unacceptable level. And we've tried multiple players at that spot, and none of them have risen to the challenge. And so we've got a massive and obvious weakness, and they haven't. So I can't see, and it frustrates me because I feel like John Cook makes decisions to win these games against somewhat lesser competition, good competition, but lesser competition, and relies on the strength of our defense to win the game. And then we do it, right? But we do that by playing great defense and extending rallies. When you do that against a great team like Wisconsin or Pitt or Texas last year and maybe Texas this year by the end of the year, they're going to have people that have practiced in games and had success in games of being aggressive out of system and put the ball down. We, on the other hand, don't do that. And so we're expected now to compete against the team that's doing that. The only way to do that is to match them, and we can't magically do that in one game. We should have been doing that for the last 3 weeks, and we weren't. So I will be shocked, pleasantly shocked, but I will be shocked if we win this game, even though we're higher ranked than them, and they have 4 losses. But those 4 losses mean nothing to Wisconsin now. Their monster front line, which was struggling early in the year, of 6'9" Anna Schmick and 6'7" Carter Booth, are now playing lights out, fabulous volleyball. Now they weren't early in the year, and part of that was their setter wasn't maybe getting them just the right sets. But now Anna Schmick is playing at a Player of the Year level over the last couple of weeks.
Right.
So
yeah,
it just frustrates me. I'm frustrated with John Cook.
Well, I haven't been following the volleyball season as closely as you, but just knowing past history and watching what happened last year, us playing away at Wisconsin is definitely going to be tough no matter the circumstance. So I'm going to predict that we lose this one, but that maybe we can win when we play them later in the year in Lincoln if we bounce back. But we'll have to see if that happens.
If we want to win the championship this year, which, our senior girls came in as the top recruiting class in the country, the girls that are seniors this year, and they were considered heads and toes above almost every other recruiting class. It was like a superstar, a dream team type class. And we have played in, those girls have played in 2 national championships, right? They've lost both of them. So they have no national championships. They have only 1 Big Ten championship. And if they don't win this game in Wisconsin, they're not going to win a Big Ten championship, and they're not going to win a national championship unless they dramatically improve after the beatdown they're going to take on Friday. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but it really irritates me because I think John Cook's coaching style has led us to this point. He's tried to evolve as a coach to deal with these new realities of NIL and all that, but I think he's let the reins off too much. And now I think our team lacks the commitment to excellence and pursuit of excellence that is necessary for championship culture.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on that game and talk about it next week. Now, obviously, in week 9 of college football, there were a lot of good games that we predicted last week and some that we didn't predict. But we'll go through those pretty quick here. LSU versus Texas A&M. That's right. LSU versus Texas A&M was kind of the big marquee matchup, and that one didn't disappoint. Yep. It was a pretty close game in the early stages, but Texas A&M kind of pulled away later. Ended up winning 38-23. I predicted that they would win 35-28. Well, you predicted a lower scoring game of 24-17. So I was pretty close on my score there. And interestingly, watching the highlights of that game, I think if you're an LSU fan, you got to feel pretty disappointed because they had all the momentum going into the third quarter. They really dominated the first half. I want to say it was like 7-0. Texas A&M really wasn't able to get anything done. But then LSU started turning the ball over. They ended up being down 1-3 on the turnover margin, and they missed 3 field goals in the 40-ish yard range. So LSU had a lot of drives where they had some success, but weren't able to capitalize on it. If those were all, touchdowns, they're suddenly dominating, right?
Well, yes. There's another very significant thing though that happened in that game, and I'm going to be fascinated. I'm going to now be a guy that looks for Texas A&M games in the next few weeks. They switched quarterbacks, and they put in a young guy who is a freak athlete and looks like a reincarnation of Lamar Jackson from Louisville fame. The guy was incredible, unstoppable, and once he was inserted in the game, I think A&M scored on every possession after he got in the game, and he was amazing, both throwing and running. The guy's amazingly fast.
I will say they were helped, like I mentioned, by a lot of those turnovers, which were like on LSU's side of the field. So they had some short fields that helped them score quick. But I did notice that their quarterback was both a good runner and a good passer. So that is a good thing to note.
Yeah, and I'm going to be very interested to see. So, who A&M plays in these next couple of weeks, and see how this guy was. This a kind of a fluky, nothing to lose, no stress, no pressure kind of thing that allowed that kid to perform that way, or is this his reality? Because if it is the reality of him, A&M's got a very, very bright future.
Yeah, that's always exciting. The other big game we predicted was Alabama versus Missouri. They were close in terms of their ranking, 15 versus 21, but it was a home game for Alabama. But Mizzou was coming off of a bye week, so that kind of influenced me to think that Mizzou had a chance. So I went out on a limb and predicted that they would beat Alabama 27-24. Well, you predicted an Alabama victory of 42-28. And it ended up being a beatdown 34-0.
Right.
Mizzou had 3 turnovers, 72 passing yards, and were 3 of 13 on third downs. So that kind of tells you right there how that game went for them.
And I've been very critical of Alabama's defense, and yet they absolutely bottled up what up till this point has been a pretty prolific Missouri offense. So maybe Alabama has started to discover itself. That's not a good sign for those who can anticipate Alabama playing in the playoff. They're going to be a hard out later this year.
I will say I didn't watch the highlights of that one, but they did get 239 total yards, Mizzou did. So they did have some success, but I get the feeling they had drives and either settled for field goals and missed, or had those turnovers, right? It's kind of like some past Nebraska games.
Exactly right. We've heard about those.
Yes, definitely. And then a big one for us coming from the state of Michigan is, of course, the Michigan State rivalry game. We just gave some general predictions in the last podcast. You thought Michigan would win. I thought MSU might pull off the upset, and ended up going Michigan's way, 24-17. But MSU definitely had their chances. They were stopped at the goal line by Michigan's defense, had a missed field goal, and then fumbled it late in the first half, which gave Michigan a field goal to kind of end the half.
Right. Yeah, Michigan State was leading. They scored the 7 points first, and at the end of the game, basically they were down near the goal line, could have tied it up 24-all, but threw a pick, and that was the end. But that was a good showing by Michigan State, especially since that was at Michigan.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Definitely a solid showing from the Spartans this time.
Yeah.
And then another one we talked about a little bit was Indiana versus Washington. Indiana coming off of their big victory over us. We thought they would win that one, and that ended up being true. Indiana was helped by getting a pick six and having a big kickoff return. So now Indiana is up to 8-0. And they're with their best start since 1967, almost as old as you.
Right, exactly. And if they win this week, they've never been 9-0.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Yeah, that would be huge for them. They're playing against Michigan State this upcoming week.
Correct. Yep. Which is obviously a winnable game, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you would look at that if you're Indiana and say, I feel pretty good about my chances. But then they do have to play Michigan and a couple of other teams maybe that are somewhat tough. But I can now see a path where Indiana, of all people, is going to go undefeated in this new 18-team super conference we call the Big Ten.
Yeah, they'd be playing for the Big Ten championship. That'd be wild. Another big one in the Big Ten was Penn State versus Wisconsin. We both thought
Yes.
that Penn State would win that one, and that ended up being the case. Penn State won 28-13. But Wisconsin was actually up. It was 10-7 Wisconsin about halfway
Yep.
through the third quarter, and then they threw a pick six. So that really gave Penn State the opportunity to get back into the game. But definitely a close one.
Yes. Well, and yeah, and Penn State pulled away late, obviously, and ended up, creating a comfortable margin, if you will. But that you're absolutely right. Wisconsin was outplaying them for the better part of the game, really. And then once the gate broke open with that pick six, then Penn State, drew off of that energy and just kind of rolled from there.
Yeah. And then Texas versus Vanderbilt ended up being a very entertaining game, even though it was number 25 versus number 5. Texas ended up winning that narrowly, 27-24. And Vanderbilt actually scored a touchdown with 40 seconds left in the game, but obviously didn't get the onside kick, so didn't have the chance to really go for the win. You have to praise their defense for being able to stop Texas on a number of occasions to keep the score low enough that they could fight back.
Right. And it's been amazing. I mean, Vanderbilt has shown they're not a fluke. That's a legitimately good football team.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And then one other rivalry game to mention, Kansas versus Kansas State, a dear one to your brother Mike. This one did not go Kansas's way, however. It went to KSU narrowly 29-27. Kansas actually had 2 turnovers and had a chance on the last drive of the game. They had a chance to potentially go down and kick a field goal. Kansas State impressively kicked a 51-yard field goal near the end of the game to get them up to that 2-point lead. It was a very close game, kind of within one score the whole way.
Right, exactly. But mostly with K-State leading, it seemed like, and Kansas was chasing, and then they finally got over the hump and actually were leading then late in the game. But then K-State came back and got that 3-pointer and extended the lead, got 2 points or what. I don't remember if it was 3 points or 6. Do you? But bottom line is they took the lead.
Right. They were down by 1, so they kicked a field goal. Yeah, they were up by 2.
It was a field goal. That's right. Okay. And that's huge for Kansas because now they're fighting for a bowl eligibility in a year when many people pick them to be one of the best teams in the Big 12. And now the Big 12 is kind of a mess. I mean, it's crazy. You got BYU, Iowa State is undefeated, BYU, Utah, Colorado is still in the mix there, and what is the BYU new, Utah new, Arizona State new, Kansas State is kind of in the mix, I guess, still too, but what a wide open deal.
Right. Looking at it right now, BYU and Iowa State are at the top. They're both still undefeated. And then, it's a sharp drop off from there to Kansas State, Colorado, TCU. A lot of these teams have 3-4 losses already.
Right.
So we'll have to see how BYU and Iowa State kind of control their destiny right now.
They do. But then you have this muddled mess after that.
Yeah.
And I look at BYU and Iowa State, okay, and you go back to the game they played against Iowa and stuff, and Iowa, like us, is a middling Big Ten team, right? We're struggling, and just as Iowa's kind of struggling, and is kind of middle of the road teams, and yet Iowa State is at the top of the Big 12. I have a hard time believing any of those teams are going to go deep in the playoff.
Right. Probably the most surprising thing to me looking at this Big 12 standings is at the very bottom is Oklahoma State, who's 0-5 in the conference and 3-5 overall. And usually they're right in the mix for being at the top. So that's quite a shock.
Isn't it? Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's just bizarre. Well, and UCF was supposed to be very good, coming into this season. Houston had some success. I mean, it's been an interesting year for the Big 12.
Definitely.
I want to mention one more thing, Alex.
Okay.
So Indiana having this great year. This coach has done an amazing job. Like I said, I think previously, he is now going to be looked at as the guy who wrote the book on how to properly execute the transfer portal, okay, and how he approached it. And I think he's going to be given credit for that. But can Indiana keep a guy like that? Especially given what's happening. Here's a prediction I'm going to have right now. If Oklahoma and Florida State both continue to dissolve as they have so far in these seasons, one of those schools may make a change. And if they do, who are they going to go after?
Right.
I think there's no doubt in my mind they're going to go after him. And if one of those schools, especially an Oklahoma, comes a calling, an SEC Oklahoma comes a calling, can he say no? Can he say no? I'm staying at Indiana. I think the answer is no, even though he's only in year one.
Unless he has some sort of tradition attachment to Indiana from his past, I would say
I
no.
don't think he does. I don't think he does. So I think it's going to be very hard for Indiana to retain him and his staff based on the amount of performance. So they might actually kind of hope that they lose here soon, so that the focus goes off of them. Because if they don't, I think he's going to be one and done for Indiana. That's my prediction. So I just wanted to get that on the record. We can now move on to this week's games.
Right. I was just looking this up since you mentioned it, because that's Brent Venables, right, at Oklahoma.
Right.
And he's still pretty new. This is only his third year as the coach. They were 6-7 his first year, then 10-3 last year, and currently they're 4-4 right now. So he's had, one good season in there, and then one pretty disappointing, and then this one not trending in a good direction, let's say.
Right, exactly. And I just think that for the first year in the new league, Texas is competing for the championship and right in the thick of it, and Oklahoma is an also ran. That's their future if they don't get something turned around right quick. And I don't think unless Brett has a massive, fires a bunch of his staff and reinvents himself, and then is able to successfully recruit at the level of Texas and Alabama and Georgia, I think their climb to getting back to relevancy at the national level is going to be very difficult with Brent Venables as their coach.
Yeah, well, because they lost to Ole Miss last week, and now I'm looking.
Yep.
They play against Maine, who they should beat, but then they have to play at Missouri, home with Alabama, and at LSU. So those last three games are not easy.
No, exactly. And so they're gonna be muddling at 500 or maybe 5-7, and that is an unacceptable win total at Oklahoma, especially based on last year's. It's just not trending well.
Right. All right. So back to week 10. Penn State versus Ohio State is the big matchup. Number 3 versus number 4 in the AP rankings. It is a home game for Penn State. And obviously, Penn State's coming off of the win over Wisconsin, but like we said, they were trailing for a good bit of that game. It was definitely not a dominant win. And OSU is coming off of the very ugly game they had against us. So what's your feeling going into that one?
And it's at Penn State.
Yes.
The only downside for Penn State is it's not a night game. A whiteout at night at Penn State, and I would have said definitively Penn State wins. But also, Penn State had an injury at quarterback. Now, and I don't know whether he's going to be back or not. So I feel bad that I don't have that information in my possession to determine if he's going to play. But I'm going to assume that he is. That whatever the injury was, it's not something that's going to keep him out long term. Or maybe I should give you two predictions. I'm going to say that Ohio State's got some issues. I think Penn State wins at home. I do. I think we exposed a little bit Ohio State. Certainly, Oregon did. But Ohio State at least played way better against Oregon than they did against us. And so they're capable of playing at a very high level. But man, Happy Valley is a tough place to play. So I'm going to predict a hard-fought game that's won by Penn State if Penn State has their quarterback. If for some reason Penn State's quarterback is not able to play, then I'm going to say that Ohio State will win it. As far as predicting a score, I really like Penn State's offensive coordinator, and you give him 60 minutes to kind of figure you out, and he does. He's the coordinator that was at KU and that had helped guide KU to some success, and then he left to take the offensive coordinator job at Penn State, and you've seen what's happened to Kansas. So, wow, I'm going to say it's going to be 38 to 35 Penn State.
Exciting game. I did just look it up. As of Monday, it is not determined whether or not that QB will play. It sounds like it's like a game time decision. He says we're going to have all the QBs practice this week. So unclear as of right now.
If he doesn't play, then I think Ohio State wins comfortably. That's just my take.
I'll go ahead and be a little bit different since both of them, didn't look the best last week. And I think some of Ohio State's struggles against us has to be pinned on their coaches for failing to adapt to what we were doing. So I'm going to go ahead and predict that they come off kind of pissed off after that kind of disappointing performance against us, and they play better against Penn State. They're not overlooking them, obviously. They know they're very good. And Penn State's QB might be hurt, like you mentioned. So because of all that, I'll say that Ohio State wins in a pretty close one. Let's say 32 Ohio State to 28 Penn State. That's a good
call. That's a good call on your part. If Penn State doesn't have their quarterback, I think Ohio State might even win comfortably, by 14 or 17 points, but we'll see.
All right. And then another one we wanted to predict because it's very interesting for us as Nebraska fans because it's two of our upcoming opponents playing each other, Wisconsin and Iowa. Like you say, both kind of in that middle of the road in the Big Ten currently. It is a home game for Iowa. And Wisconsin is obviously coming off of the kind of disappointing loss to Penn State, a little bit similar to us, right, in that they maybe could have won it. They were in the lead. Iowa, I'm not so sure on what their situation is.
Well, I think that didn't they beat Northwestern? Didn't they play Northwestern and it was a tight game? If I remember correctly.
Actually, they did beat Northwestern, but it was not tight. It was 14-40.
Oh, okay.
And it's a home game for Iowa, so I'm gonna think I might side with the Hawkeyes here. Just say the momentum's on their side.
I would agree. I think Iowa is going to be the better team. And now, do we have to have a number for this baby?
Yep, I'll go in and predict that it's a bit lower scoring, as Iowa is wont to enforce on their opponents, and so that they win. Let's say 28-21 over Wisconsin.
Okay, good call. I'm going to say it's going to be 28-17. Iowa over Wisconsin.
Okay. And then we won't have to give predictions for these ones, but I just want to mention, because there are quite a few other good games this week. Michigan is playing against number 1 ranked Oregon. Florida is playing against number 2 ranked Georgia. And then Indiana is playing Michigan State, like we mentioned before. And USC has to go play at Washington in a former Pac-12 matchup.
Wow. But it's at Washington.
Yes.
So the USC game, it's such an important game for USC. Here's my hope. I hope they lose. So I'm going to pick USC to lose because I want them to lose. Because I want them to be feeling like, I want them to have reasons as a team to be feeling like their season's ruined when they play us in 2 weeks. So 3 weeks, I guess. Right. Isn't it? It's 3 weeks.
Right, because we have a bye coming up.
Because we have a bye week. Yeah. So So I'm going to predict the Washington victory because it is at Washington, and at some point you just got to believe that Washington home field is going to matter. But because Washington got beat this last week by Indiana, they may be packing it in for the season. You know what I mean? We're at
Yeah.
that point in the year where the psyche of teams starts to go in one of two directions. Either they're optimistic that they can build to something, or they're already so off on their goals that it's hard to keep the locker room playing for the old you. You know what I mean? But it
Yeah.
is a home game for Washington, which usually matters.
Yeah.
So I'm going to predict the Washington victory then.
USC is coming off a pretty strong win over Rutgers, 42 to
Yep.
20.
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and side with USC because, like you say, both teams are fragile in terms of their psyche. You know, both of them are not doing as well as they would expect. So I'm not sure that home field advantage will matter as much for Washington, but I'd like to be wrong. I would agree with you. It'd be great if they beat them.
Yeah. Well, and the Rutgers thing, Rutgers is a shell of the team they were. And I watched some of that game, and Rutgers was still kind of in it. And then their premier running back, who we were very, very concerned about, left with a concussion and didn't come back, obviously. And so he's done. And after that, I just think they didn't have enough offense to begin with, and without him, they definitely didn't. So it was inevitable that USC was going to win.
All right. One last question for you. Michigan, right, obviously also having a disappointing season after being national champions last year. So you'd expect they would definitely lose to this number 1 ranked Oregon team. But say it is a home game for Michigan. It is in the Big House. So say that Michigan pulls out a narrow victory over Oregon. Does their season flip around? Do the Michigan fans forgive Sharon Moore for getting that upset?
Oh yeah. Oh, well, I think they have already forgiven Sharon Moore. I think the circumstances that he inherited were almost a guarantee to lead to a disappointing result, right? So even though they're defending national champs, everybody did not expect a national championship. Now, what they didn't expect was that Michigan may struggle to get to 6 wins, but that win against Michigan State dramatically helped them in that regard. And so I think that Michigan will play hard, but I think Oregon is just going to outclass them both in terms of speed and physicality, even, which is usually a hallmark of Michigan. But Dan Lanning and his SEC history is coming to bear here, and they look like they're a machine. So I don't know. Unless Oregon decides to lay an egg, I think Oregon wins this, and it might not be too close. So I'm going to say 14 points or 17-point victory for Oregon.
Yeah, I would agree. We predicted they would beat Illinois last week, and they did so 38-9. Frankly, the score could have been much worse. They were up really big by halftime.
Yep, exactly.
So, all righty. Well, we're in for another exciting week of college football, and actually, you're coming out to my neck of the woods this weekend, so we'll get some time to be together, watch the UCLA game together. So I'm looking forward to that.
That is going to be fun. And man, if we have a victory, Alex, it is going to be a celebration. That's the thing. I'm trying to visualize the positivity of us finding a way in Lincoln to beat UCLA so that we can get that 6th win and get that monkey off our back. And I think if we have that monkey of getting the 6 wins off our back, then we can play quite loose the rest of the year. Right? Then every win after that is just gratis, man. It's just, icing on the cake. Right. So, and with that mentality and just play for fun, I think could lead to some really great things for Nebraska. So we really desperately need this 6th win, and it's got to happen now. Otherwise, the pressure just cranks up.
Yes,
so
I agree.
I want this, and I want it bad.
Well, it's reminding me of like those commercials. It's like, it's my money and I need it now. It's like, it's my win and I need it now. That's what Dad's saying.
That's right. Exactly right.
All right. So if you enjoyed this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can leave us a rating or a review there. We always love hearing feedback from the fans. We'll read your comments out on the air. So thank you all out there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. Until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.